So jumping right in, first and foremost, PriceLabs is built for professional property managers. So over the years, we've been in the industry for about 6 years now, and working with so many large managers who are, managing tens or hundreds of properties. What we've realized is that for pricing recommendations to be effective, we do need that layer of human control to be kind of woven into the pricing recommendations that we give. So when we're automating your rates, we try to give you as much control as possible. So everything that the system touches, you're also able to adjust on your own. So we're of course using our own market data when we're coming up with rate recommendations. But if you have your own trends, your own seasonalities, your own day of week adjustments, your own minimum stays that have worked for you in the past, and you don't necessarily want to change those, your goal is more to automate those to optimize your rates. Definitely an option here. That's kind of the crux of what our system is built around here. So typically the problem with managing your rates manually is that it just takes a very long time. So 3 steps of the process. First is having access to that local data to know what adjustments to make. So a lot of property managers that we talk to who have been in the game for a long time, their perspective is, hey, I've been in this market for years and years and years, let's say 10, 20 years. I know my seasonality. I know who's booking. I know when they're booking. I know all these things here. So they're typically using that historic data to set their rates. What's become particularly important with COVID and trends just changing completely, everyone's seasonalities are off, everyone's booking windows are off, is that market data changes. So relying purely on your historic data, no longer kind of the most viable option here. And you really do need to be implementing that market data into your trends. So either looking at what's going on Airbnb and Verbo and checking in on a weekly, daily basis and making adjustments there. Definitely an option, definitely time consuming. So here we just provide you access to that local data. Next, you actually have to monitor that data and kind of see what trends are happening. So see, hey, have bookings increased? Have bookings decreased? What dates are getting more bookings? What's the lead time? All those things. So that kind of monitoring takes a lot of time. And then finally, that adjustment of your rates based off of the trends that you see is also traditionally a very time intensive process. So with adjusting your rates, a lot of property managers we talk to, they set kind of their seasonal rates for the year up front. So they say, hey, high season, mid season, low season, maybe my holidays. Those would all be things that they input manually. And then they kind of let that run throughout the year. The problem is if there's ever a shock to the market or things don't go as planned, to even update your seasonality can be an extremely time consuming process in the PMS without some of these bulk adjustment features. And then also if kind of new events pop up, or let's say some of your booking trends change, it's extremely important to be able to just go into the system, make one single adjustment that would affect your properties in bulk so that you're more the brains behind the process. You're telling us what to update and not spending all of that time making these adjustments on your own here. So our solution with PriceLabs is essentially to provide a platform that one collects and cleans all of your market data. So we're collecting data from Airbnb, Booking.com, VRBO, and HomeAway. We're cleaning that data to try to track what reservations are happening, what dates are getting booked more often in the market, really where is that demand in your market, so that you have a good picture of what's going on. Second, we adjust your rates based off of the trends that we see. Now, I'll go into what this adjustment process looks like in a second. I'll go into the factors that we consider and what factors can be adjusted. But essentially what we're trying to do here is make sure that your calendar is optimized for all of those trends that are currently happening. So this data gets collected on a daily basis. That way it's always kind of up to date. You're always working off of live trends. And then your prices are automatically adjusted to kind of reflect those trends here. Third, on top of those trends that we kind of use for your pricing, you're then able to kind of implement any rule-based strategies. So things that you would typically do manually, let's say discounting your listings when their occupancy is low, increasing your listings when their occupancy is high, making adjustments to your seasonal gaps, seasonal prices, filling different gaps with different minimum stay requirements and different prices. These are all things that can be implemented in PriceLabs on a rule-based basis. So here you're telling us what you want the rule to be, and then the system handles that actual implementation of that rule. So your revenue manager, they're no longer doing that grunt work of, going into the system, making an adjustment for 50 different properties. They're just telling the system to make that adjustment for them. Finally, all adjustments that can be made in PriceLabs can be made in bulk. So our goal is essentially to save you as much time as possible, and then finally send those final up-to-date rates directly to your PMS on a daily basis here. So the kind of three pillars of what we do that we'll dive into today and talk about how larger professional managers can use them most effectively. First thing, dynamic pricing. So of course, optimizing your rates based off of the demand for each day. The second idea is access to that market data so that you know what's going on in your market, what are people booking, when are people booking, how are people booking, giving you access to all of that information so that you can make those educated decisions. And then finally, giving you a great platform for automating any of those pricing and minimum stay strategies in bulk here. So jumping right into dynamic pricing first, giving you a quick overview of what we're talking about here. Essentially, when you connect your listings to PriceLabs, everything runs off of a single base price. And then we apply all adjustments to that base price. So that base price, best way to think about it, this is essentially an average price for the entire year, onto which we will provide pricing adjustments. So this is the price level for your listing. So you are in full control over how expensive or how inexpensive your listings are. All we control is the trends that get applied to your listing. So we're not price matching you against your neighbors who might be, managed by homeowners, might be inexperienced. They might not be setting their rates correctly. So that doesn't mean that your rates should be any lower here. So you're in full control over that price level. Then we start applying different trends onto it. So we're looking at probably 4 to 5 years of scrape data in most markets to determine what's the seasonality for your area. So where's that high season? Where's that low season? How much does demand change throughout the year so that we know how much to increase your prices when demand is high and how much to decrease your prices when demand is low to kind of maintain steady bookings throughout the year and not leave any money on the table. Then we look at different day of week trends. So looking at future dates and seeing how is demand trending? So are people booking more weekends in this market? Are they booking more weekdays? And what should the real price difference be between the two? Then automatically applying that to your prices here. Third, looking at different lead time trends. So what last minute discounts or far out premiums should be applied. And then finally, using kind of neighborhood demand detection to really pinpoint those high demand dates in your market. Where more people are booking in your specific location so that we can automatically increase your prices when demand is high or automatically kind of decrease your prices when demand is low here. With this event detection, this data gets updated on a daily basis. So we're constantly scanning all future dates to see what % of your market is currently booked so that whenever demand starts to increase for far out dates, we know, hey, something's going on here. We're getting an abnormally high number of bookings. So let's start increasing your prices. Now, as we'll slowly, hopefully pretty soon here, start seeing events get rescheduled after the whole coronavirus pandemic here, our system would be able to see, hey, people have started booking dates way out in the future. So let's say March of next year, people are already booking. Since an event was announced, let's automatically increase your rate. So instead of you learning about the event, maybe taking a week to update your prices to kind of make that reflect in your pricing, our system would detect that and automatically update it for you here. Now, all of these trends that you see here, we do give you control over every single one of them. So these are kind of estimated by the market, but these can all be adjusted by you. So things like seasonality, day of week prices, your different lead time discounts. If you have an idea of what works for your market, you can choose to completely ignore our recommendations or include our recommendations for some of these factors, but set others on your own to really optimize this for your properties here. So we're never saying, hey, this is the seasonality you should be using. We're saying, hey, this is what we're seeing in the market. But if you do have any other ideas, definitely implement those and adjust those here. And I'll show you how we can do those in bulk for all of your properties in just a second here.
Hey, Oliver.
Yes, sir.
All right, two questions, I think three maybe, that are relevant to this. Number one, how big is market in a rural area? So maybe you can talk a little bit about how do we define a market for a listing?
Definitely. Yeah. So when we're talking about a market, we have essentially two markets that we're tracking. So for seasonality, it's a slightly broader region that we're tracking. So this might be more of kind of the zip code basis, where we're essentially trying to see, hey, for this particular area, what are the booking trends? So those booking trends tend to not vary too drastically based off of the area as a whole. If there are outliers, let's say you're in an area where there's a big city, but then you're a small beach town right next to the city, that's close in proximity, but might have a totally different seasonality, our system would detect that and provide different seasonalities for the two here. When we're talking about things like event detection, those are kind of hyper specific. So for event detection in particular, we're tracking the 200 to 300 listings that are geographically closest to yours. So kind of putting your listing in the center of a map, increasing that radius until we get to about 200 listings. And we're tracking what the occupancy, whether it's booked or available for each of those 200 listings for all future dates here. So we're essentially trying to see what percent of those 200 are currently booked. And that's always going to be kind of the closest listings to you. So in an urban environment, that might be, under half a mile. Whereas if you go rural, I believe the largest radius that we'll expand to is about 10 kilometers here.
10 miles. Excuse me. So we go out to 10 miles. Related, sort of related question, but related to your what you're on right now is during the COVID time, all of the historic data going back a few years is pretty outdated. How do you overcome that?
Definitely. Yep. So with COVID, our team went in, we tracked a lot of the differences in trends that were kind of happening in your market. And we had to go in and make some manual overrides to the pricing for a lot of markets. So we looked at how lead time has changed, how seasonality has changed, and we kind of implemented some manual changes in the algorithm since this is such kind of a black swan event. So this doesn't happen typically. Difficult for an algorithm to account for such drastic of a shift, but we essentially went in and made some manual overrides here. Now, with your pricing as well, your price is also partially dependent on the occupancy of your own listings. So if occupancy of the market drops, prices are going to drop automatically here since market demand is down. But then also if we see that you're sitting completely empty, no one's booking your properties, we'll go in and automatically make adjustment to bring that price down a little more to try to spur more demand here. And then as demand for your properties picks up, we'll start easing that price back up. So it's kind of a gradual process where depending on your occupancy, prices kind of fluctuate within a bounds here.
Fantastic, fantastic. So if I was to summarize that, there are three major parts to algorithm. One where we look at historic market data, one where we look at current market data and future looking market data that we use for day of week and for event detection. And then thirdly, we look here at your own internal data. So at a very high level, what we did for COVID is turn down how much historic data that we look at, but which in principle, we turn up how much future data and how much your own property data we look at. Oliver, another related question, and I guess you dive into this, but how often do you update prices? Is it possible for people to look at one price, reload the page, and another price pops up? And I'm guessing when they say people, I assume this is Elena who's asked this question. I assume they mean the consumer and not the property manager.
Yeah, so those guests. Yep. So our system, we re-scrape that market data on a daily basis. So we know, what's changed since yesterday, what new bookings have come in. Based off of that, and based off of, dates getting closer to the booking date here, any new bookings that you've received, we recalculate all of your prices on a daily basis. And then we would push those out to your PMS once daily. So that push typically happens between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. Central Time. So typically overnight, if you're here in the States. But if someone were to be browsing your particular listing, they happen to refresh the page right as that kind of price push went in, they could see different prices. Wouldn't happen too frequently, but definitely a possibility.
Cool. Thank you for letting me interrupt you. And that's it for now.
Perfect. Awesome. Definitely everyone keep the questions coming. We'll be covering a lot of content. So definitely good to address those kind of as we're talking about these specific topics here. Perfect. So after we, calculate all of these trends, implement all this data into your pricing, we'll essentially spit out a pricing calendar here that's optimized, where each day has an individual price associated with it, and then also an individual minimum stay associated with it. In a second, we'll talk about kind of how to set the rules to control your minimum stays. But this pricing calendar is what would sync over to your PMS, where the price for each date would be overridden in your PMS by what the price in PriceLabs is here. Now, the next step of what we do, so we give you this kind of base recommendation, it's optimized for the market. The next step is letting you kind of implement your own pricing strategies on top of that recommendation that we're giving here. So to do that effectively, we try to give you as much market data as possible to give you an overview of what's happening in your particular neighborhood that you're pricing for. So with this market data, you can kind of select any address that you want to analyze and any radius around any address. So let's say this is a market dashboard for all of Chicago here, but let's say you wanted to analyze this small section here. Definitely doable just by selecting that as your address and selecting a small radius here. So you can really hone in on those local trends for, the listings that people are booking if they're considering your property here, and really, look at what booking trends are happening here. So here we'll give you a lot of data for what's happening in terms of length of stays, in terms of lead times, what future dates are getting booked, what prices are getting booked, what prices are people putting up. And based off of that data and based off of your own internal performance, you can essentially automate a lot of your pricing strategies. So you could say, hey, my booking window, people are booking until, let's say, about the last 10 days. You could say, within the last 10 days, start kicking in my last minute discounts. Or you could say, hey, I'm having a lot of gaps in between reservations. Let's discount those gaps to try to make them a little more attractive to the guest who's booking, or for instance, even discounting your properties based off of your own internal occupancy. And we'll jump into a couple different kind of case studies for different listing types and showing you how someone would manage rates, based off of that listing type in just a second here. The second part of what we do here with these kind of automations is looking at different minimum stay strategies. So first, we were looking at pricing here. Now we're looking at minimum stays. And with minimum stays, what we found is that in most markets, how long someone stays drastically depends on how far out they're booking for. So the further out that someone makes their reservation, it's likely that that the length of their stay is going to be longer. So our market dashboards show all of this data. I'll dive into those in just a second here. But for instance, you could say, hey, my typical minimum stay is 3 nights on weekdays and 4 nights on weekends. But if someone's booking more than 90 days in advance, I want to only allow a minimum stay of 7 nights. So this way you're requiring longer bookings further out to really fill in your calendar with those big chunks, so that someone doesn't come in and, let's say, book a 2-night stay in your high season that blocks someone from taking a 2-week stay. So we're always trying to fill the calendar with as big of bookings as possible for those far out dates, and then gradually filling in the gaps between bookings as we get closer to the booking date. So you'll have that far out minimum stay. You'll have a super far out minimum stay. So you can say, hey, if anyone's booking more than 180 days in advance, so 6 months in advance, make them book 10 nights. Then as you get closer, that 3-night minimum would kick in. And then as you get super last minute, you can say, hey, instead of a 3-night minimum, let's let people book for 2 nights within the last 5 days, for example, here. Then of course, we do have a gap filler as well, where you can tell us, hey, if there's ever any gaps in my calendar that are shorter than my minimum stay, I want those to be filled automatically. So you could say any gaps between 2 and 10 days, automatically fill them with a minimum stay that is the length of the gap. And then you can provide some pricing adjustments on those gap fillers also. And Richie, I know this is a topic that typically has questions. Anything coming in here?
Not on minimum stay right now, but there is still a lot of questions. There are a lot of questions on market data that if I don't know if you want me to stop now or if at a later point do you want to take those?
Totally. We can hop back to market data. Definitely.
All right. Sorry about that. But okay. So number one question, which is has come up often, and especially on this screen, is from Adam, and he's saying, "This graph, is it all included as part of PriceLabs? It looks great and seems to have a lot of data compared to a service that he's mentioned."
Awesome. Yep. So these graphs here, we can actually, oh, my windows got a little rearranged here. So this is what these kind of market dashboards typically look like, where we just provide a ton of data, everything from, how many new bookings came in the last week, so you can kind of judge your pacing, to what do prices and occupancies look like in your market for future dates. For weekends, what does the weekday versus weekend occupancy look like, day of week factors. Lots and lots of data in here that's really good to look at, especially when you're kind of setting up your prices in PriceLabs and setting up those rules for the first time here. So this is an add-on feature to PriceLabs. So for this, we do charge $10 per dashboard per month. The data in these dashboards gets updated on a daily basis. We send you an email update once a week that shows you, hey, these are the major shifts and trends that we've seen this week, so that you can kind of go in, take a peek at those. But this is kind of an add-on feature for an additional $10 per dashboard per month. We do start all users out with one free dashboard, and that would essentially give you 1 month of access to a dashboard. So you could say, hey, for my area, I want to track trends. I want to see, for example, when are most people booking? So how far out are most bookings coming in? And based off of how far out, we kind of color code this by how long the stay is. So for example, if you're setting up those minimum stay rules to be dynamic, definitely good to take a peek at these graphs so you can see, hey, based off of how far out someone's booking, for example, if they're booking 2 to 4 months out in advance, 90% of all bookings are longer than 7 days here. Versus if they're booking in the last 2 to 6 days, only about 50% of bookings are 2 days or longer. So having access to this early on, definitely recommended for setting those rules. But afterwards, it is that $10 per dashboard per month, which is extremely helpful, especially since trends have been changing so frequently here. Long answer to a short question. Sorry about that.
Thank you. I'll combine 2 questions, one from Sarah and one from Solius. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. So the question is, to build your market data, and market data, they're referring to both market dashboards and actually for dynamic pricing as well. To build your market data, does PriceLabs data come from PMS that use PriceLabs, or do you scrape data? If you scrape data, how do you get accurate data in small owner-operated markets? And secondly, when you say you're tracking 300 listings in my area, do you track certain platforms, or do you track listings on multiple platforms, I guess is the question.
Awesome, loaded question. So all of the data that we use for the algorithm and for these market dashboards, that is all scraped data. So we do have a team of data scientists in that kind of cleaning process for how do we extract accurate reservation trends based off of purely scraped data. That's kind of our secret sauce here. So there's a lot of cleaning that goes on behind the scenes to try to determine, hey, which dates are actually bookings versus blocked dates. Yeah, so just a lot of kind of cleaning that goes into that to make sure that the data is as accurate as possible. For, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought here. All of the data that we show in these dashboards here, this is all data from Airbnb. And then additionally, when we're looking at those 300 closest properties, that is also Airbnb data. If you're in a market that is kind of VRBO or home away heavy and Airbnb isn't quite as popular as a reservation platform, what we found is that a lot of property managers or property owners will still put listings on both platforms. So they'll put some listings on they'll put their listings on both Airbnb and on VRBO. So if the booking comes in on VRBO and it becomes offline all of a sudden, that Airbnb listing is linked to that VRBO listing, so it also becomes offline. So even if the booking didn't happen on Airbnb, we still have that data. So even if it's the direct booking site that received the booking, Airbnb also goes offline, so we can kind of track things that way. So if you're in a market that is very kind of direct booking heavy, we'll kind of infer those trends from whatever data is available. But yeah, that's kind of the extent to it. Did I answer that question completely here, Richie?
I think so. Yeah, but Sarah and Solius, if we did not answer your question, feel free to ask it again here or send us an email at support@pricelabs.co, and we monitor that email 24/5, and we will be able to answer any questions that you have there. And I know you're going to get into this in a bit, and we should talk about PMSs when you get into that, and you're going to address some of our case studies. But one question that's come up is Airbnb, Vrbo, and other OTAs provide rate recommendations. What makes PriceLabs better and worth at the extra cost?
Totally. Yeah. So with those Airbnb recommendations, as I'm sure a lot of these people on the call are familiar, it's kind of a broken system because it's in Airbnb's best interest for the booking to happen on Airbnb. So they're always catering towards the guest. And what we've noticed is that their pricing recommendations are typically on the very, very low end to try to drive bookings on their platform here. So they're trying to get more guests to book on their website, and they're not necessarily trying to make you the most money possible. So our algorithm is optimized around the property manager, so the owner here, and we're trying to squeeze kind of every possible penny out of every single booking, whereas Airbnb is trying to get as many bookings as possible on their platform here. Additionally, of course, our system revolves purely around pricing. So there's just so many different levers you can pull to really automate that pricing process, put in different pricing strategies, make adjustments, do different things with minimum stays. So it's kind of that holistic platform for pricing where it's more than just getting a recommendation for every day. It's having the ability to make these adjustments as well here.
Brilliant. There are questions about how PriceLabs works within PMS, or what settings override, and also what is a dashboard, and like what does geography area mean. But keep going, and I think I'll interrupt you when the time is right in the presentation.
Perfect.
And for
Sounds
everyone
good, thank you.
And for everyone who's listening in, once again, there is a Q&A box at the bottom. As Oliver's going through the presentation, feel free to ask questions. And if I find it appropriate, I'll pause them during the presentation and ask. If not, I will ask them towards the end.
Perfect. Awesome. No, definitely love all the questions coming in. So essentially, to address that kind of idea of PMSs, I'm not sure if this is the kind of full question here, but after you've applied all of your adjustments, you have all of your strategies, you have all of your minimum stays set, your pricing calendar is essentially what would be updated by all of those rules. So the price you see in this calendar would be kind of the final price after you've made all of your adjustments. Then we will be sending these rates to your PMS on a daily basis. So the flow of data happens where all adjustments that you make, those happen in PriceLabs. Then once a day, we take our up-to-date rates, send them over to the PMS, And then the PMS would be responsible for sending those rates to your direct booking site, to VRBO and HomeAway, to Airbnb, booking.com, wherever you're listing your properties here. Now, in terms of kind of what overrides what, PriceLabs always overrides kind of the pricing and the minimum stays within the PMS. So whatever you have set in PriceLabs is king. Although you can set some kind of additional parameters that go on top of our pricing within the PMS. So if you're looking to do any weekly or monthly discounts, any cleaning fees, extra taxes, extra person fees, those are all things that would typically be set in the PMS. And then they apply on top of our rates and then get sent out to the different channels with those different, premiums or discounts applied here. Same thing goes for those channel managers. So let's say you're sending a different rate to Airbnb, sending a different rate to booking.com, and a different rate to your direct booking site. That adjustment happens in the PMS. That happens on top of the rates we send over before that price gets distributed. So if you have that, 10% premium for booking.com, PMS takes our rates, increases them by 10%, and then sends that price over to booking.com here. Perfect. And that happens on that daily basis here. The one thing to note with these OTAs, any discounts that you have on them. So let's say you have a last minute discount set in Airbnb or like a early bird discount, those would still apply on top of the rates that get sent to the OTA here. So if you're discounting in PriceLabs, beware that the OTAs can also discount on top of those rates that we send over here. Perfect. So now quickly talking about one case study. So Summit Cove. This is a property management company out of Keystone, Colorado. They have been a PriceLabs partner for some time now. And for them, a very well-established company where they had a very good revenue management process in place, except it was manual for many, many years. So they had a pricing team constantly looking at what's going on in the area, updating their prices on honestly a daily basis. So for them, the benefit of PriceLabs was really that it let them focus on the big picture. So their revenue managers, their role changed from the actual implementation of these strategies to figuring out what should we be doing, spending more time on the analysis of, hey, this is happening in my market, this is what we want to adjust, and just having a better way to kind of set these in bulk and price them. So for them, it was a lot of that automation. It was a lot of changing individual nightly rates and different minimum stays in bulk here. And essentially that let them capture more reservations when demand is low, since we automatically update your rates based off of your demand, and then also just higher rates when demand is high. So they were missing out on some of those different events that don't have names necessarily. They were missing out on some of those high demand periods when they could be charging a little more. So PriceLabs essentially automated that for them. So with larger users, if you are very active with your pricing, there is still a lot that we can do in that automation, and then also in that kind of detection of what's going on in the market and having that better market data that kind of updates your rates more frequently here. Perfect. So now I wanted to jump into the actual system here and talk about how you would update pricing strategies for a couple different use cases. So first, talking about, let's say you have a situation where you have a large cabin. Your booking window is kind of 60 plus days. So people are making stopping, reservations usually around 2 months in advance. Most reservations happen further in advance than that. They're targeting longer stays. They don't like to have one, back-to-back stays, since a cabin this side, difficult on the cleaning team. And they also have very seasonal rates. So keeping this in mind, kind of that large cabin profile, I wanted to jump into the PriceLabs platform here and show you how you would set that in PriceLabs. So first and foremost, all of these parameters and strategies that we're about to set here, they can all be set on the group level. So instead of going into each of your cabins, setting these rules 10, 20, 30 times, you could set them once in a group here. And then any of these strategies would apply to all listings within that group. So if you ever make a change, make it in one place, and then it updates kind of automatically. You can sync that over directly to your PMS, and that's kind of an instantaneous change here. So if we jump into the kind of rules here, so here we have that large cabin profile, just to show you some of the functionality, things you can do here, things like last minute prices. So their booking window is 60 plus days out. So starting within the last 60 days, their goal is to slowly start discounting their property since demand is dropping. So they want to really have whoever's still looking to book a property to make that price a little more attractive here since less people are looking. So they have that gradual discount going into place here. Next, for them, turnover is super tough. So if they have back-to-back bookings, so filling any gaps, they're willing to fill gaps, but if they do have to, have that back-to-back booking, they want to charge a premium for those dates. So they can essentially say, hey, if I have any 2-day gaps in between my bookings, I don't like taking 2-day stays, but if someone's willing to pay 50% more, I'm willing to take it since that, is a little bit of a bonus for the operations team. Next, they're trying to target those longer stays. So with these minimum stays, what they can do is essentially say, hey, we're willing to take a 3-night stay for weekdays and a 4-night stay for weekends. But when most people are booking my property more than 90 days out, let's say, I want to limit those bookings to 7-day reservations here. And then that last month when the booking window is still hot, so let's say, between 60 and 90 days, that minimum stay would drop down to that 3-day minimum for weekdays, 4-day minimum for weekends. So any gaps in between those week-long bookings, they could then fill with some of those shorter stays here. Additionally, they could say, hey, if someone's booking super far out, so let's say more than 240 days out, so almost a year in advance, they want to make sure that they're, accepting only those largest reservations. So any family reunions that might be happening, any weddings, and they want to have an even longer minimum stay set for those dates here. Perfect. Finally, any gaps that appear in their calendar, as you can imagine, if you have a 10-day stay far out, let's say a 7-day gap gets created super far out, you still want that to be bookable. So they could set up a rule here that says, hey, any gaps that appear in my calendar between 2 nights and 10 nights, fill those with the minimum stay that's the length of the gap. So any 2-day gaps get a 2-night minimum stay. Any 7-day gaps get a 7-night minimum stay, and so on here. Perfect. Additionally, since turnover is difficult for them, tough to have a guest leave and then another guest come in the same day or the next day, they can say, hey, if someone's booking a back-to-back reservation, set a premium for those dates so that we're charging a little bit more for that kind of faster cleaning here. Perfect. Additionally, they kind of want to control their rates far out. So they can say, hey, outside of 180 days, increase my prices so that the minimum price is at least 20% higher than my base price, or increase it from my minimum, etc. here, just to kind of have more control. And then finally, they're using some of our occupancy-based adjustments to really fine-tune their pricing as we get closer to that booking date here. So if we click edit profile, this would essentially look at what percentage of these nights in these day ranges are full. So let's say 31 to 60 days out. So from today, if we look out 31 to 60 days in advance, what percentage of this day range is full? And if they're still sitting empty, the system would then go in, provide a pricing discount for these dates. If they're filling up too quickly, we provide a premium for any remaining dates, and so on. So here they're really able to kind of control their pacing and make sure that they're providing discounts if their listings aren't getting booked here. Now, I know for a lot of those larger properties, seasonal pricing and making sure that your price is correct for the different seasons, very, very important. So they could come in here and adjust seasonality as a percentage. So each listing has its own price levels. PriceLabs can either be handling that seasonality, or you can disable our seasonality, and then they can come in and say, hey, depending on what season we're in, if it's our low season, shoulder season, high season, etc., adjust both the minimum price and the base price as a percentage here. So since we're managing things on the group level, you could say for all my listings in this group, take my standard minimum price and increase it by 75% in the high season. Or in the low season, take my standard minimum price and decrease it by 20%. And setting this up here once would then apply to all listings in bulk, or if they wanted to manage listings one by one, definitely an option where they could even put just fixed rates in this calendar here and say, hey, in my high season, I want a minimum of 300. And in my low season, I want a minimum of 150, for example, here. So lots of flexibility between where you choose to manage things. So you can definitely use a combination of managing some of these functions on the group level and then managing other functions on kind of the individual listing level here, depending on the property. So you can always get more specific or just manage things in kind of broader strokes here. Perfect. So that was kind of a description of what managing like a larger property would look like. Also wanted to give a quick view of managing something like an apartment building or a resort. So in this scenario, we're talking about, a smaller listing, more of an urban environment. Here, we're specifically talking about a multi-unit listing, so kind of an apart hotel vibe where maybe you have 10 units within the same building and you need similar pricing. In this case, your goal is, of course, to maximize the occupancy and the revenue from the building as a whole, and less so kind of those specific units within the building here. So they're targeting shorter stays since it's an apartment. Their booking window is a lot more last minute since it's more urban here. So they're kind of, most of their bookings are coming in, 7 days or more in advance, and less so, 2 months plus here. So taking a quick peek at what something like that would look like, you can have a different group for those condos and those resorts in your portfolio here, and you can have totally different rules that apply. So those last minute discounts, those could kick in much more last minute here. And then for those orphan days, so those gaps in between bookings, in this case, cleaning an apartment, the operations there, much less intensive. So they actually want to provide a discount for all of those gaps to really drive bookings here. So if any 2-day gaps popped up in their calendar, they would actually discount those since they're targeting their occupancy here. Same thing goes for minimum stays. So they have that standard minimum stay of 2 days for weekdays, 3 days for weekends. Here, their windows are just a lot smaller. So they can still target longer bookings based off of all of that data that they see in these market dashboards here for when people are booking and what lengths of bookings are typically happening here. Oh, here, give me 1 second. Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. My tab got covered by the Zoom link. And then additionally, they do have those orphan gaps filling where here they say, hey, I'm willing to take a 1-night stay, but only if it is a gap in between 2 bookings. So let's say you have a 2-day booking, a 1-night gap, and another 2-day booking. This 1-night gap can automatically become available only if it's kind of in a gap here. So that would automatically update and then get sent to the PMS here. So you can see the pricing strategy changes completely based off of the type of listing. So you can have these different pricing strategies set up on this group level to kind of apply in bulk to all listings of that type that you have. So you can manage things however you want, whether by type, by location, by number of bedrooms. So whatever has different trends, that can all be managed in PriceLabs kind of in bulk here. And then last thing to mention on these groups, let's say you were managing things by location. So let's say all of your 2-bedroom listings in Seattle. If you ever need to make an override, extremely easy to do that on the group level. So you could say, hey, for all of my 2-bedroom listings in Seattle, you can click update overrides here. And you could essentially say for all of these listings, let's say there's an event happening in January from this Wednesday to this Saturday. You want to increase your prices since you think you can charge more because of your historic data. You could say all of these properties increase my price by 50%, for example, and set a minimum stay of 5 nights for this date period. If you add that in here, that would now apply to all properties. So instead of making this change for each of your bedrooms individually, you can make it once here, update it in the future, and so on. So last thing, let's say you know that your holiday period is always crazy. You can also say, hey, for these dates here, I want to update my minimum price. So take my standard minimum and let's double it, for example. That way you're protecting those dates. You're saying, hey, I want to take at least this rate, but feel free to go above it if demand kind of dictates that. So lots of options for how you can kind of manage things in bulk here. And any questions coming in on this bulk management or these customizations here, Richie?
Not yet. No, keep going.
Okay, perfect. So that's kind of that bulk management of strategies. And then when you're kind of looking at managing your listings on that day-to-day basis, we have a multi-calendar here that makes it super easy to see all of your properties on one page here. So you can filter your properties to only look at certain groups of your listings that have certain tags, if you want to tag them by city or by type, etc. Filter them here, click display calendar, and then you'd see only those listings show up on your screen. And then you would see the actual pricing calendar for all of your listings on one page here. So this way you can kind of go through the list, see, hey, maybe this price looks a little too high, might want to make an adjustment here. Let's set that at a fixed rate of $650, for example. Add that in as an override, go down to the next listing, set an override for the minimum stay for these dates, add that in. So you can quickly have access to all of your listings, make adjustments kind of one by one. So not bulk adjustments, but here we're talking about making individual adjustments just a lot more quickly and efficiently here. Perfect. So closing out here, PriceLabs is available kind of all around the world. We have property managers on, I believe, all continents except for Antarctica. Pricing data comes in from all markets, so we always have local data since we're scraping all listings in your area. So wherever there's listings, we do have data for your market here. And finally, just kind of leave up here our pricing breakdown. So we charge a fixed fee per listing per month, depending on the number of listings that you have. When reading this chart, one thing that's important to note here, let's say you're managing 50 properties. All 50 aren't priced at this $499. The first listing is always charged at $19.99, 2 to 5 are always at $15, and it's really that kind of additional listing that is charged at that 11 or that 7 or 5, etc. So that's available on our website, pricelabs.co/plans, if you want to check it out. But yeah, that is PriceLabs in a nutshell here. So if there's any questions, let's go ahead and address those. I know we're pretty close to that 1 hour mark now.
Let's address the cost question. Can you also touch on the dashboards as to how much they cost and what is a dashboard?
Definitely. Yeah. So market dashboards, those are kind of added on at $10 per dashboard per month here. So how it works on this market dashboards page, you can see all the dashboards that I have created here. You create a dashboard around an address here. So let's autofill this. You select the kilometers around that address that you want to analyze, and we essentially spit out data for all listings that fall in this circle here to kind of keep you up to date on those trends that are happening. This data refreshes on a daily basis here. And if we look into this dashboard, lots and lots of information for things like length of stay and lead time, upcoming prices and occupancies, what new bookings came in the last 30 days or the last 7 days, what dates are getting cancellations, lots of data on amenities that are both popular in your area, amenities that are in high demand, and then honestly, I think this is super important, the different policies and fees that people have in your area. So this is typically tough to find. Here you can see, hey, what weekly and monthly discounts are other hosts offering? What weekly and monthly discounts are guests actually booking with this orange line? And then also different cleaning fees, cancellation policies, extra person fees. So all of those kind of policies, we have a lot of data on these, and these would also kind of update on a daily basis here.
One quick question, Oliver. Once the dashboard's created, can you change the area or the radius?
Yes, so for each dashboard, you can adjust that radius here. So you can say, hey, right now I want to analyze everything that's super specific to my area. So let's say a 1 kilometer radius, but then maybe you also want to get that kind of whole market overview. So then you can extend it to 10 kilometers, click update, we'd regenerate those that data with those with that new radius in mind here. But that address that is permanent after you do create a dashboard here.
And can you also quickly touch on the email update?
Yes. So these dashboards, they'll get emailed to you once a week. You can choose the day that that email comes in. So if you always, review prices every Friday, let's say, Friday morning, an update email for, hey, this is what's changed in your market. These dates have started seeing a lot more bookings, maybe lead time is down 10%, for example. We'll send you kind of a summary email that shows, hey, this is everything that's changed, so that you have an idea going forward. You can reference the dashboard to say, update your prices or your strategies based off of what's happened.
Cool. And so one thing that I want to address, which although very clear, is that we have two separate products. There is dynamic pricing and there is market dashboard. Dynamic pricing is we look at all the market data and we automatically make adjustments to your pricing. Market dashboard is where you can see the market data, like we expose that market data for you to see. With that, there is a question that KR is asking, Oliver, if you could address, which says, is there a one-to-one mapping between properties and dashboard, or is the dashboard mapped to a particular geography? If you have several, for example, if you have several 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom condos in one building, would one dashboard cover them all?
Totally, yeah. So if you have, let's say, 2 properties in one building or many properties in one part of town, you can definitely have one dashboard that kind of is responsible for giving you data for all of those properties here. So it's very much that geography basis. With that too, you could apply this bedroom filter onto your dashboards as well. So if you have some small units in an area and some larger houses in the same area, you can use the same dashboard for both of those and then just filter by number of bedrooms. So you could say, hey, first I want to look at 1 and 2 bedrooms, apply that, and then later on switch that over to, let's say, 5 and 6 bedrooms. So yeah, super flexible, don't need a dashboard for every listing. One thing we do provide in kind of our standard dynamic pricing system, for each listing here, when you're looking at that kind of listing level calendar, we show you this base price help tab. So this shows you some toned down market data. So here we'll show you things like average prices by bedroom type, kind of what the median price is, top 25% of prices, bottom 25% of prices, showing you the percentage occupancy here. Sorry, let's filter a certain bedroom type so it doesn't get so crowded, showing you what percent of, let's say, 1 bedroom listings in your area are full for all upcoming dates. So there's definitely some market data provided here to give you a good idea of what's going on, but those market dashboards dive into, much deeper detail.
Fantastic. And then there are 3 connected questions that, Oliver, if you don't mind, I'll just take on.
Yeah.
Elena is asking, is it better to connect Airbnb and Vrbo with PriceLabs, or say they have a PMS Smart BNB, can they just connect PriceLabs to Smart BNB? Second, sort of related question, which is Brad is asking about Kigo and can we send minimum nights to Kigo? And Emmanuel is asking, does our PMS need to support LOS pricing? So number one, PriceLabs works with about 40, I want to say at last count 46 or PMSs. And we're every month adding a couple PMSs. So the only OTA we directly work with is Airbnb. We also work with Vrbo, but it's a manual process. And then we can work with 46 different PMSs. If you have a PMS, the preferred route is you send PriceLabs prices to the PMS, and then the PMS sends it across to whatever OTAs you connect to them, right? Mm-hmm. Second question is, PriceLabs has a ton of functionalities, as you guys can imagine. When we work with 46 different PMS systems, some have some functionality and others don't. So it might be that if your PMS does not have a capability to take on some of our feature set, we may not be able to send that across. One example being, for example, Kigo, where I think Kigo is probably the only PMS where we don't send minimum stay. Every other PMS we do send minimum stay, and that's dependent on Kigo to be able to consume the minimum stay information. And similarly, if a PMS cannot take everything that we send, that does not mean largely like we won't integrate with a PMS unless they can take our pricing information. That's the minimum thing. And so yeah, I mean, if we can take a pricing, if we can take a pricing, or if we can send pricing information, we will not integrate with that PMS. So ideally, yeah. And lastly, if you go to our homepage, you'll see an integrations tab at the top where you can see all the PMSs that we integrate with. Cool. With that, we've almost come up to an hour. If there are any other questions, guys, feel free to type them in. Yeah, we stick around for another 5 minutes. Feel free to type them in.
Perfect. And one thing to note on that question about kind of sending all of our functionality to the PMSs, when we look at things like customizations here, so it seems pretty intimidating. We're talking about, last minute discounts, all of these kind of cascading minimum stays, different adjacent factors and everything. We're not sending these rules over to the PMS. All of these rules get executed in PriceLabs to kind of come up with this pricing calendar here. So anything that you set in the customizations, that would be used to influence the price in PriceLabs. And then all we're sending to the PMS is this final price and the final minimum stay per night. So the PMS doesn't know that it's a last minute discount or a premium on Friday and Saturday. They don't need that functionality. All they need to be able to receive is our prices here.
Fantastic. And there is no more questions here other than one last question. Have you been able to calculate the value add for your service? Because of PriceLabs, a typical property increases revenue by X% or something.
Definitely. So very difficult question to address, since kind of the value add in terms of dollars depends on what you're currently doing with your prices. So if you're someone who went into your property, you purely set a $100 rate across the board for all nights, your value add is going to be a lot bigger than someone who is already going in on a daily basis, looking at what's happening in the market, updating rates on a daily basis, and adjusting things that way. For the person who's going in on a daily basis, we still provide a lot of that data that'll help them, make smarter decisions, and then also implement their pricing changes a lot quicker, kind of automate the job they've already been doing. But that dollar value add depends on kind of the current state of your pricing here.
And Oliver, if you could go back to the website and point to the customer stories, that is also a fantastic resource.
Yes. So customer stories here, definitely recommend taking a peek at a lot of these. Here we talk to a lot of different PriceLabs users, do kind of an interview format where we talk about their experience with PriceLabs. So I would definitely recommend checking them out. We'll show you, hey, who are we interviewing and what was their experience with PriceLabs? A lot of these kind of dive into detail on what was their increase in revenue, how did their operations change, and so on here.
Cool. No more questions. You want to wrap it up?
Perfect. All righty. Well, hey, no, that was a super interactive session. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. That was a lot of fun. We'll be sending out a recording of this session in a few hours here once that processes. But if you do have any questions, do send those over to us at support@pricelabs.co. If you have questions about integrations, about getting started, let us know and we can kind of walk you through the process here. So everyone, thanks for joining us here. Have an amazing rest of your day. And yeah, take care. Let us know if you need anything.